Here on the Colour of Country Life Flow FM, great to be chatting with Rowan Ramsey in the final week of the federal election campaign. How's it travelling from your point of view, Rowan?
Oh, pretty good, Ricky. 6 weeks is a pretty long time, and it's kind of hectic because, the job of being the member for Grey is pretty busy all the time, long days and lots of kilometres, but elections obviously add a little bit of intensity, trying to get those 135 or so polling booths ready and volunteers in place and all those things. It's a bit of a logistical thing, but we're going pretty good, I think.
Now, you've represented Grey, I think, has it been 5 terms, or are you seeking your 5th term in office?
No, it's 5 terms. I came in the what we call the road slide of 2007, so still there.
Now, the question then is, you've got a lot of experience then in politics. Is politics entirely about popularity, or is it entirely about policy, or is it a bit of both?
Well, I'm not sure, I'm not dead sure it's... it's a bit of both, I suppose. I was going to touch on the popularity side of it, but there are examples of people that haven't been particularly popular, but they've been respected, and it's about finding your own place in that. But certainly over the years, you build up a lot of contacts, a lot of experience, and I'm government whip at the moment, and that obviously gives me the ability to make sure I can get in the minister's office when I need to. I tend, my chosen pathway has been to work with people rather than against them. So. You'll see in Parliament, on my own team even, the odd person go out and sort of go that road and take on his minister or her minister in public, in the public arena. Now, I thought in the longer term that's counterproductive, and I'm pretty confident I'm right. And certainly when I look around Grey at the moment and what we've been able to achieve, particularly on our major infrastructure like our roads and other things, I think it's a good pathway now. I remember when I got the money to rebuild the dog fence, for instance, I was speaking to the minister and he said, I just respect you for actually going about this the right way. We've got the outcome and everybody's happy and it's taken hard work to do so, but brought the state government on board, brought the growers on board, and we achieved an outcome. And I could probably go back and spread that right across all of the achievements we've had in Grey, including massive road funding of well over $1 billion now and ongoing, and it will keep going. And so that's been brought about because I methodically go about building the case by being able to get in those doors and make the case.
Now, I think that's probably something that your neighbour, Tony Passon in the seat of Barker, describes as political capital that you've accumulated over time. And I guess those things you're talking about are policy outcomes, if I can call them those. But we've tracked with great interest how Jeff Brock in the seat of Stewart came across, and he was generally mystified himself that he swept, Dan Van Holst Pelican out of office, generally because he's just regarded as a nice bloke. It was a popularity result as far as we could see, and Liz Habermann had a pretty popular run in the seat of Flinders and now seems to be getting a bit of support in your campaign in the seat of Grey. So, is it all about popularity in the contest that we've got in Grey? I guess when you look at the interview we did with Liz Habermann, she didn't seem to be terribly across the policy side, say, on getting the $1 trillion of debt under control. She was just saying, I'm a nice person, back me in.
Yeah, well, I think people need to take a look at the ability to do the job, like how a person will methodically go about doing the job. Anyone who thinks being the member for Grey is easy, and I can tell you, Ricky, there's a few out there because that's what my emails tell me. But it's not easy. I often say it's not just the 150 towns or so and communities you have to be across, and the 27 councillors and the 27 mayors and the 27 CEOs. It's things like the diversity of the industry. So you have to know about agriculture and horticulture. And irrigated horticulture on Adelaide Plains, for instance. Now you have to have a good understanding of the wine industry because the Clear Valley sits within it. You obviously have to have an understanding of broad agriculture. You have to understand the mining industry because just about every major mine and just about every mine in South Australia is in the electorate of Grey. You have to understand what actually makes the steel industry tick and what that smelter in Port Pirie needs to be profitable and stay in place and employing people in Grey for the future. You need to understand what's needed and what's not needed for this transition in our energy makeup. People call for billions of dollars government dollars to be spent on renewable energy, when in fact the renewable energy industry is actually building its own capacity now, no longer with the assistance of government subsidies. And so you need to be able to get that balance right, if you like. In the last budget, we announced that the $110 million that we had in place some years ago for a solar thermal plant in Port Augusta, for instance, is back on the agenda. And that's a great thing, because that's cutting edge or new technologies, the kind of things that actually haven't been done realistically around the world. So we are prepared to back that, back that project. And like we are with the hydrogen, to give it a start and get going. But then it needs to stand on its own two legs.
Yeah, and just on that one, before you move on to other topics, that's sort of the driving force behind that is concern about climate change. Liz Habermann's thrown her lot in from a policy sense and saying she supports Climate 200 and the initiatives they have on climate change, and yet the Climate Council projected just about a week ago that areas like Fowler's Bay, something in the region of a third of the properties in Fowler's Bay, would be uninsurable due to coastal inundation. Is there a bit too much over-egging it when it comes to the concerns about climate change? They're saying by 2030 there'll be inundation in that area.
Yeah, I think the Climate Council, along with Tim Flannery, said the Murray would never have water again too, didn't it?
Well, I think
I mean, this kind of overreaching scare campaign rubbish is really unhelpful in this space. I have no doubts, and I have critics on this place. I have no doubts that CO2, human-induced, is leading to human-induced global warming. I have no doubts at all. But then we have to be realistic about Australia's contribution to that, firstly, and our ability to actually change that trajectory. And now, I've said many times that global warming is a global issue and it needs a global response. Now, Australia is well and truly up to the pace on that global response. 23% reduction in emissions since 2005. There's not a lot of countries in the world that could boast better than that. We're on target to meet our 2030 targets, and we'll meet the 2050 target. But it's because we actually have a plan and a method to get there that it's not crippling our economy along the way. We are actually getting there. Now, what really gets up my nostrils is when we see an event like Glasgow and all these countries from around the world go there talking about their targets in 20, 30, 40 years' time, knowing full well none of them will be in Parliament or government or whatever they have in that particular country at the time, and then going back to their own countries and doing exactly the opposite and saying we'll worry about it later. Now, it makes sense for Australia to be up with the leading nations. It makes sense for us to develop the technology that can actually change places like India. But people should not be fooled into thinking that if we cut our emissions by half, that it's going to make any difference to the Great Barrier Reef. Yeah. What will make a difference to the Great Barrier Reef is actually dealing with the localised issues and making sure that we get that the fertiliser chemical inflows and things like that onto the reef managed and making sure that we deal with those immediate threats. The global warming issue needs to be taken on by the whole world because it's a whole world issue.
Now, Rowan, you mentioned economic management in those comments there. Now, we spoke previously about your predecessor, the Liberal at that time, Barry Wakeland. According to reports now, I'm hearing he'll be handing out how to vote cards for Liz Habermann. But he nominated in an In Daily article one of his reasons for shifting support to her, that he was angry with the coalition over $1.3 trillion of debt. You might have heard the interview we did with Liz Habermann. I asked her what she would do about the debt. She effectively said, well, when I get to Canberra, I'll think that through then. What's your policy position on dealing with this $1.3 trillion of debt?
Look, I've got to say, I'm very surprised and in a way disappointed to find myself part of a Liberal government that has accumulated that kind of debt. But no one ever expected that we would be heading into, into COVID-19. Now, at the time COVID-19 started, we had effectively brought the budget back into balance after the Labor years. It was balanced in surplus when Labor came into government. It was completely out of whack when they were thrown out of government. We brought it back balanced, and then we were hit with COVID. Now, the fact that we were in a stronger position allowed us to borrow up big. Now, it's a lot of money, I have to say. But it's a lot of jobs. It's a lot of businesses. It's a lot of people's lives that we've actually saved through that. expenditure. Like JobKeeper was one of the most inspired policies by a government around the world. Now, people can say, oh, so-and-so got too much and they didn't really deserve it. What we had to do, and I think Scott Morrison touched on this about his decision-making capacity, he said, we just had to jam it through. Like he had to bulldozer it through. That's what he said. And if those policies, those assistances, and they right across the board, 700,000 jobs, so many businesses would have folded up and never opened the doors up again, never would have been able to reconnect with those skilled workers that they had in their businesses, were they able to come back. And then there was all that support for various industries like the travel agents, like the movie theatres, to actually keep them going, keep their doors open to get them through the COVID, because we knew that when we started to bounce back from COVID, we needed these people in places and operating at their best, and that's exactly what's happening. And that's why we've got a 4% unemployment rate, and we've got there are pressure in the system now for wages to rise, and business outputs have been on the rise for some considerable period of time now. The economy is absolutely whizzing along, apart from a few restricted areas.
Now, we've all got our fingers and everything else crossed that things will keep humming along very nicely, like you say, but I understand the Coalition have pledged no new taxes. So Liz Habermann wasn't able to answer this question about, well, what taxes would be or how they would address she would address paying down the debt. Do I assume that just through the existing tax system, once that economy puts more tax through the government, you'll end up paying down that debt and deficit over the next term of office?
It's a very virtuous cycle, Ricky. If you get unemployment down, there's not only are you paying less out in benefits, you're getting more back in receipts. Our export industries, and a couple in the energy field are actually returning billions of dollars to Australia at the moment, and providing energy for other parts of the world. Now, I could spend you a long time and bore you on the intricacies and unfairness of the international carbon accounting mechanisms. I won't. I've said plenty about it in Parliament. But we can grow the economy, and with that we'll deal with these issues to come. Now we've got some real issues facing the Australian economy. Inflation will be one of them, but don't think Australia can stand alone in this space. Worldwide, countries have pumped billions of dollars, trillions of dollars into the world economy, and it's inevitable that we'll see a lift in inflation. Yeah. What is important that Australia is down the bottom end of the countries that are experiencing inflation and not at the top end, and I think we can do that with good judicious management.
Yeah,
but an experienced team in place is what you need to deliver it.
Yep, Rowan, just lastly, we have spoken a bit about Liz Habermann and some of the other candidates simply because Labor have not made their candidate available at all. It does appear they're running dead in your seat. What does it say about Labor's approach to the seat of Grey?
Yeah, I think they're looking for an independent to get past them and then direct their preferences in that direction. And I think that's a sort of fairly disappointing position to take. But it is what it is. What I do say is I'm picking up there's a bit of support around on pre-polls and whatever across the board for other independents as well. And so there seems to be a lot of focus on one. And I'm not too sure that others don't deserve to get some time as well.
Oh, we've given we've given airtime to Suzanne Waters. That may be one you're referring to.
Yeah. Well, and that may be the case. Now, I certainly don't line up to support Clive Palmer's policies in a lot of areas, but I don't think the singling out of one or two candidates and just saying, well, these are the only ones that people are interested in is probably completely fair, but
it's partly a factor of the fact they're the ones that have been willing to be interviewed. The One Nation's candidate wasn't made available either. Yeah,
I take that point, and you started off with the Labor candidate. It was pretty obvious that they don't want her talking to anyone, and they don't want any publicity. So, I think it's that, along with, and you touched on it, the Climate 200 grouping, which are only running against Liberal candidates, against coalition candidates, is a pretty fair indicator that actually there's a bit of a team job going on here, and people should be very aware of that, understanding that if that is the case, where that loyalty is likely to lie in the case of a hung parliament.
Yes, a team job or a teal job perhaps, Rowan. Thanks very much for your time with us today, and all the best for the 21st of May.
No problems. Thanks very much, Ricky. Good to be with you.